Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is invest. Let's take a look at some of the definitions or ways that we can use this verb. The first way to use the verb invest is to mean to spend money with the expectation of achieving a profit by putting that money into some sort of financial plan, stocks or shares, or even some type of property. A second way you might hear this verb invest used is to mean to devote one's time or effort to a particular thing with the expectation of there being some worthwhile result. A third way we can use the verb invest is to mean to buy something whose usefulness will repay the cost. So as we look at these three definitions for our verb, I hope what you're seeing is this idea of time or money being spent in the present. And it's being spent with the idea that there's going to be some future benefit, something good that comes from this present action of investing time or money. You should know that invest is a regular verb. To make the progressive tense, we're just going to add ing to form investing. The past tense and participle forms of this verb are made by adding ed. The verb invest ends with this T sound, so our ed is going to make an id sound. Invested, invested. Now let's take a look at some phrasal verbs. And the first thing I want to point out is these phrasal verbs that we look at, particularly the first three, are really just going to repeat the definitions that we looked at. It's really common to hear the phrasal verb invest in. And there are instances where we might see it separated, and we'll look at some examples of that. So again, as sort of a refresher, invest in could mean that someone is spending money on something in order to improve it or to make something more successful. Let's look at this usage in an example sentence. Will the legislature invest in education this next session? So here we're describing the legislative function of our government. So many people think of that as the House, the Senate. We have that on a national stage as well as in our state governments as well. And this question could apply to either one. A second way to use invest in is to mean to use something such as time or effort for a particular purpose. Let's look at another example sentence. They have invested so much time in coaching and mentoring children. A third way to use invest in is, again, connects back to our third definition here of buying something, especially something that maybe you need or that you're going to use quite often. So here's an example sentence. I'm going to invest in a new computer next year. So again, with this idea, that computer is going to be used a great deal. The last phrasal verb we'll take a look at is to invest someone with something. And this usage means that a person or possibly an organization, a group of people, is being given power, influence, or authority of some kind. So let's look at an example of this usage. The governor is invested with the authority to rule the state. So again, here we see the governor is given authority to make rules to benefit the people who live in that state. Now let's continue using our verb invest. And today we'll take a look at simple past tense, the past progressive, and the past perfect. Let's start with the simple past tense. And you might remember we're using this verb tense to describe a completed action that occurred at some known or definite time in the past tense. You might see time signals indicating a known period, right? Like yesterday, last month, 5 years ago, something like that would tell us. But sometimes it's implied as part of a conversation or part of a story that we're reading. So in the affirmative, we're going to use our ed form of the verb, and that is true no matter what our subject is. So let's take a look at an example sentence. She invested most of her retirement money in mutual funds. So again, this is referencing a really specific type of, or collection, we should say probably, of stocks and bonds. Now, if I want to make a negative sentence in the simple past tense, I'm going to use did not and the base verb. So in the simple past tense, particularly with negative sentences, I don't use that ed form of the verb. Let's look at another example. The company didn't invest in television advertisements. Now, if I want to make a yes or no question in the simple past tense, I will start with did, then I'll have my subject, then the base verb. Did you invest in Google's stock in 2004? Okay, so there's a specific time reference in that example sentence. Now let's take a look at the past progressive. We're using this verb tense to describe an action that was ongoing. And many times in these sentences, you're going to see sort of an interrupting action. That interrupting action will be in the simple past tense. To make the past progressive, we're going to use a past tense form of be, so that's was or were, and then we'll use that ing form of the verb. Let's look at an example sentence. The restaurant was investing in an expansion when the lockdown started. So here we have kind of that ongoing process. They're spending money to make outdoor dining space more appealing, perhaps expanding it so that they can serve more people outside. And then we have that interrupting action when the lockdown started. If I want to make a negative past progressive sentence, all I need to do is insert not after my be verb. You might hear native speakers use the contraction forms wasn't and weren't. Let's look at another example sentence. They weren't investing in real estate. Finally, if I want to make a yes or no question in the past progressive, I'm going to start with my be verb, then I'll have my subject, and then that ing form of the verb. Were they investing in startups? Now let's take a look at the past perfect. We're using this verb tense also to signal an action that has happened in the past. And usually we're using the past perfect to signal that something happened before another event or another action. To make the past perfect, we're going to use the past form of have, that's had, and then we'll use the participle form of the verb. Let's look at an example sentence. The restaurants had invested thousands of dollars in outdoor seating when the state announced additional restrictions. Okay? So the idea here of spending money, or the action, I should say, of spending money occurred before the announcement. If I want to make a negative past perfect sentence, all I need to do is insert not after had. You might hear native speakers use the contraction form hadn't. Many schools hadn't invested in enough technology for their students before the pandemic. Finally, if I want to make a yes or no question in the past perfect, I'm going to start with had, then I'll have my subject, and then that participle form of the verb. Had you invested in a home generator before the storm? Okay. So this last question is connecting back to our third definition. right? Buying something that's going to have a future benefit for us or others. Now, let's take a look at some words that are related to our verb invest. The first word we're going to look at is the noun investment. Just like the verb, this noun can have a few different meanings. One possible meaning for this noun is the action or process of investing money for profit or some sort of material result. Okay? So let's take a look at an example of this usage. Legislatures are debating how big of an investment to make in education. A second way to use our noun investment is to mean a thing that is worth buying because it may be profitable or useful in the future. Let's look at an example of this usage in a sentence. Do you think that buying a house is a good investment? Finally, the last way you might hear the noun investment used is to mean an act of devoting time, effort, or energy to a particular activity with the expectation that there's going to be some worthwhile results, some benefit, something positive and good. So let's take a look at this usage. The company is making an investment in their employees' development. So the idea here, the company might be spending money on additional training or education for their employees with this idea that in the end it's going to make the company, their product or their services better. The last word we'll take a look at is the noun investor. An investor is a person or an organization that's putting money into some sort of financial plan or property. And again, they have this expectation that they are going to make more money. They're going to achieve a profit. Let's take a look at this noun in a sentence. Are investors in the project nervous about its outcome? There's a good chance you hear this noun investors quite often if you follow news and reports about our stock market, either here in the US or anywhere abroad. That is pretty common as far as a topic goes that people follow because it's connected to so many things in our economy. Thanks so much for watching today's video. I hope you have a great day.